What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy, that's Joe, and this is the Race Day Rundown.
We're at Bristol Motor Speedway this week, and I'm excited because it's an elimination race. We're going from 16 drivers down to 12, but before we get started, there are still spots available in our free weekly DraftKings contest. So if you want to get in on the action, drop your DK tag below, and we'll send you the invite, and you'll be added to the list for the weekly contest. It's been a lot of fun to get that rolling. We have our race guide for our Patreon members available. There's a link below. Go click it. It will be something to pair nicely with all the numbers and everything we're getting ready to talk about. Our full DK impact scores are going to be in that race guide. This race preview we're about to dive into, Jeremy, that's part of it as well. You want to kind of take it from here and kind of set up what we're about to experience in this elimination round for the NASCAR playoffs?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the last great Coliseum. It is one of the best races, in my opinion, all year long. It's going to be intense. Everyone's fighting for, as Rick Allen would say, every position is a point. So it's going to be great because, like you said, this is a 500-lap event. It's a half-mile track, so roughly 266 miles. A lot of performance points, 350 are up for grabs this time. The stages are going to break down into 125 the first stage, 125 the second stage, and 250 laps that third stage. And the competition caution is what, lap 30, I believe?
Lap 40.
Lap 40. So whoever gets out front early will more than likely lead those first 30, 35 laps. So consider that when you're building your lineups. Doesn't mean it's going to be the pole sitter. Doesn't mean it won't be. But that's going to be quite a few points right there. It's going to take him several laps to catch up to lap traffic. So he's also probably going to get a lot of fast laps because he won't be dealing with anybody else. So consider that when you're building your lineups. We know when a few cautions are, but more dude, there's probably going to be a caution before we even get to the comp caution. So I think, and the last time we were here, Kevin Harvick won. He might do it again. But let's talk a little lineup strategy before we get to the drivers. I think there's a few different ways you can build your lineups this week. Obviously, there's going to be for sure one dominator, but there's almost always 2 to 3, sometimes 4. What are you going to be trying to build a majority of your lineups around? What kind of roster construction are you looking to do?
I'm kind of trying to find a nice balanced approach, but I want obviously the expensive drivers at the top this week because they're going to be dominators. This is an elimination round, so I'm wanting to find drivers that have something at stake, and there's a lot of drivers in this field that have a lot at stake this weekend, and it's going to be interesting to find out how we can find that right mix this week. I think it's a great opportunity to be different in the GPP environment, so I'm going to be building a couple contrarian lineups based on some drivers I think will have some low exposure but have a relatively high upside.
Okay. So do you think it's going to be mostly 2, 3, or are you going to be experimenting with all kinds of others? Is it going to be any dumpster dives for you? Because I kind of bring this up because if you look at the last few optimals, it's a semi-balanced. Usually you don't see anyone, I think, below maybe like 5,700, something like that. There's always going to be some expensive guys in there. But one of the things I also wanted to ask you is, do you plan on playing any cash games? Because I feel like building a cash lineup this week is very difficult. But if you do decide to build a cash lineup, would you then consider doing some of these pump plays? We don't expect them to get you a ton of points, but because they're so cheap, it might allow you to get several of these higher price guys. If we get a 3 to 3.5 dominator type race, what would you consider, or what do you think about that for maybe a cash game approach or even GPP?
It would have to be a GPP in that scenario. If I'm taking any type of risk, I'm not doing it in a cash game environment like that. I would be more willing to take that approach that I got done talking about, having the steady approach. But in a GPP environment where you can stack 3 dominators potentially and then have a couple different guys at the bottom, sure, there's not a huge pool that I'm interested in. And we'll talk about our DK impact scores here in a second and fill you in. But yeah, I think there are multiple ways to build lineups. How are you approaching it?
Well, I haven't completely decided how much I'm going to play this week, because when we start getting in these races that have a lot of laps, it's really hard to – you got to nail the dominators. And because there's so many – I mean, in the last 6 races here overall, there's 5 different winners. And a lot of different guys have led laps throughout there. So we have a good-sized pool of who will probably be the ones. But you got to build a lot of lineups to hit a lot of nice combos. So you either do that or you play it a little safer and just kind of maybe target 4 to 5 instead of, 7, 8, 9. Because there's a lot of decent plays on here. So I haven't completely decided if I'm going to do more GPP, if I'm going to take a stab at some cash. I like to hand build some so I can also get a feel for what some other people may be considering too. So a little undecided, but I'm thinking about taking a chance on some of these punt plays just because it might pay off well to get those higher price guys. And again, be a little different. It may not be optimal, but if you're in the big tournament and you still finish 20th or so, 25th, that's a nice little payday right there. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about it. But let's talk about who these drivers are, because we have a lot to get to, unless there's anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, before you get there, we talked in our full version of our podcast about a lot of these drivers we're about to dive into. So if you've got some time and want to check out some more of our thoughts about that, check that podcast out. And also you talked about this being the Great Coliseum that we're about to experience, the gladiator action. NASCAR released a schedule with the second Coliseum on the schedule next year. So we talked a little bit about the 2022 schedule, previewed that a little bit in that episode. But I'm excited for this event now. You want to get into the driver action and start at the top, because I think he's my favorite. Kyle Busch, he needs to have a strong performance because where he's at in the points, and this is one of his better tracks. He's got 8 wins here. I've got him at a 10. So I think he's going to be somebody you really could feel strong about constructing lineups in, because he's so dominant in events where his back's against the wall. We've seen him not perform that well in a year, the last couple of years, but I think he gets it done this week.
Well, you're right. Kyle Busch, he does come in at the top of the salary board. He is 11,500. He's starting 9th, so he has some PD upside. And he's also not so far back that he couldn't still get up there early.
Yep.
He has 8 all-time wins here. Him and his brother, they have really owned Bristol the last 2 decades, really, if you think about it. I like Kyle Busch too. I'm going to be at a 9.5. To me, this is just one of those races similar to a super speedway race. It's very unpredictable, so feeling comfortable, almost like locking in a guy. When I give a guy a 10, I'm kind of thinking almost like a locking in, can't miss. I don't know if we can quite say that about any of these drivers here, because so many, especially 4 of them, are below the cut line, so they're going to be so aggressive. It could easily take a Kyle Busch out who might be running really well. Even if he's in the lead, trying to get around lap traffic, you can get damage. We saw that a few years ago with Maddie D trying to get around, Ryan Newman, and then Hamlin ended up winning. So a lot of crazy things can happen at this race. So I understand why you're at a 10. He is your championship pick. You need him to do well because he's not that far above the cut line. But I like him, but there's some other guys I also like as well, including the next guy on the list, Kyle Larson, 11,300. He's starting 5th. I'm going to give him a 9. I'm a little lower on him than Kyle Busch, and it almost just comes down to the history that Kyle Busch has here with the 8 wins and the extra 4 PD upside. That's the only reason why I don't have him the same, so I'm at a 9 for Mr. Larson.
Yeah, Larson has everything you're looking for having a solid performance. Once again here, I think the stats speak for themselves. This is one of his solid tracks. He's got a lot of top 10 performance history here. I'm looking for good things from him this week as well. I think somebody that needs a strong performance is Denny Hamlin at 10-8. He's starting 2nd. He's in a position with that price tag to being somebody that could really pay dividends for you because he could rack up a lot of performance points, lead a lot of laps because he's been fast in the 750 horsepower package that they're in this weekend. He's been dominant so far in the playoffs. He could get out to an early lead and lead a lot of laps here. I think that's why I landed on a 9. Where are you at with him?
I'm at an 8.5, which to me I think is still pretty solid, but obviously it's less than the other two guys we've already talked about. I think he's likely to get around Truex early, and I think he should lead some laps. He's still a little expensive, but obviously can easily pay that off. I think I'm just going to be a little bit more targeted on a few other guys. I will still have exposure to Hamlin, but if I'm turning a few guys down, it might be him just because it is hard to have 3 races in a row where you're just flat out dominant. It's not impossible. We've seen it. But this is a cutoff race. There's a lot of guys who have a lot more to gain than Denny Hamlin does. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a bumper early and maybe gets up into some loose stuff. So I think he's worth a play, especially if you're mass entering. 8.5 is a solid score, but I personally will be shifting a lot of my ownership to the next guy, Chase Elliott, 10,500. He starts 4th. He's got really good history here, no wins. So we'd like to see him get a win there, but we know he can get it done on short tracks. I'm going to be at a 9.5 on Chase. I like him a lot. I think it's really tough between him and Larson, but my gut tells me Elliott's going to be maybe just a tick, might be the fastest of the Hendrick cars. That's just kind of where I'm playing it. That's what I'm guessing this week. So I don't know. I like Elliott a lot. How about yourself?
I like him. I'm at a 9. I think him and Hamlin and Larson and the next guy on the list, Logano, who we'll talk about here in a second, are all in very similar positions. I'm thinking that these are really the same plays. You want to have exposure to this core group, and how you divide that is really up to you. I think Chase Elliott, like you said, could come out really strong, as this is an elimination race. He's got 2 teammates that need really strong performances as well, that are below the cut line. This is going to be interesting to see how Hendrick approaches this week, and I'm looking for Elliott to have a good performance.
Yeah, and just to sum up real quick, something I was thinking about, they can't go into the next round, provided there's no catastrophic failure here. They can't go into the next round just assuming they're going to win the Roval with the way we've seen Larson and even a few other guys run on road courses this year. That would kind of be his, I'm sure, thinking like, hey, that's our race to get into the round of 8. I think they got to be thinking win and maybe stage wins if they can get it, because they need extra playoff points to survive the round that has Talladega in there, where they run good, but anything can happen there. So that's just kind of a thought process that maybe that 9 team may be thinking, might be a little bit more aggressive. I think they'll be a team that's aggressive, and I also think the next guy, Joey Logano, 10,200. He starts 3rd. I'm in a 9. He's run good here. I'm not considering this in the 9 score, but he did win the dirt race here. Which, by the end of it, it was very hard dirt, packed in, real slick, kind of old school Bristol. I don't know. He might get it done. Are you going to be on the Logano bandwagon this week? Or
I'm at a 9 as well. I think he's somebody's giving the 3rd starting position. He can really be impactful on this race because he's there on the brink of elimination too. He has to have a strong race, and this is somewhere that he's had very good performance history. He doesn't have a win in the last 6, but he has 3 top 10s. He's going to be somebody there competing at the end. He's been fast in 750 horsepower equipment throughout the season. He's the most consistent Penske driver, I think, over the season in this package. That's why I like him so much.
All right, Mr. Pole Sitter won the most recent race, Martin Truex. He's next on the board. $9,900. This is probably our biggest difference on the slate. We have a few other drivers that we differ on. I think I know where you're coming from, but I'm just going to say I'm going to give Truex a 4 this week. It's risky. But the main reason why is Bristol has just not been a great race for Truex in his career. He's had some good runs. He's had opportunities where he's started up front but still gotten passed up. They're in a win. They already won. They know they're locked into the next round. Similar to Hamlin, I think that's a guy that if you are not locked in or you're still kind of close to that cut line, you're probably more likely to give Truex the bump because, hey, you'll face consequences later if there are any. You know you're not hurting his chances of advancing because he's already locked in. I'm going to give him a 4. I don't know how many laps he can really get out front and lead, and there's no PD upside, only downside. He gets into a wreck even early or even a little late. It could really hurt his overall score. So that's where I'm at, but why are you going to be higher on him?
Well, I can see why you're hesitant. I'm at a 7 though because I think he's the prime driver to use in a GPP tournament scenario and build lineups around because he offers all the upside in the world. Discounted rate as a dominator at $9,900. I think that we've seen the 750 horsepower package the first 2 races of these playoffs where he's been dominant. Both races getting top 5s, and he won obviously last week. It's something that's going to be something I'm really focused on being a little bit different in this area. I don't think he has a ton of ownership, but we'll see how it all ultimately plays out. But I think being a 7, there are other drivers I will be way more focused building more solid lineups around because he definitely does have that downside you talked about.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, I'll be going to the next guy, and I'm sure a lot of people will be doing the same. Kurt Busch, 9,600. He's starting 15th, 6-time Bristol winner. I said it earlier, him and his brother, they just flat out dominate this track over the last couple decades. I'm at a 9. There's a lot of PD upside. He can achieve a high value without getting that many fastest laps or many laps led and just a solid top 10 finish, and he could hit at least 6x. I think that's good value, even though he's a little expensive. I think some people will be hesitant, but I think that's where more people will go if they're looking in that price range between Truex and Kurt Busch. How about you? Where are you at on Kurt?
I gave him a 9.5. I think has great performance history here. We looked at the data and talked about it in our podcast, how he's been very strong here. And being that his teammate Ross Chastain has been one of the fastest cars in these playoffs, Kurt Busch has been there to match it. I think he's somebody that's really strong, especially with that place differential and the path to value there.
So let's talk briefly about a driver who is, I just want to get this correct. He is 18 points below the cut line. William Byron. He is, he is 9,200. He starts 14th. I guess I'll ask you kind of quickly, do you think he advances out of here? Because I'm going to give him an 8. I see the upside there. Do you think he advances to the next round?
Yeah, I give him a 9. I think he gets the job done. I think he's doesn't have a lot of strong performance here, but he has won here in the Xfinity series before, and he has had strong runs here. It just hasn't survived the race, so he needs to survive this one to make the elimination cutoff. So I think we see a strong race from him, and he has a good path to value starting 14th. I'm at a 9 on him.
A guy I didn't really think I would be this high on because I didn't pick him pre-playoffs to even advance out of this round. I thought he would struggle a little bit more, but Kevin Harvick, 9,000. He's starting 8th. I'm at a 9. I think he's another guy that could achieve 6x value and not do that much. I mean, he has to do some. He needs to get out front and lead some laps and for sure pick up some fastest laps. But we've seen them elevate. Stewart-Haas kind of as a whole once the playoffs started. It seems like they found a little something. I don't know if he's going to win this race, but he's a guy that could actually really help your lineups out. And for a guy who he won the last race here, $9,000, you're not taking a huge risk on someone like that. Do you think you're going to end up with any Harvick in your lineups?
Oh, for sure. I've got a 9 on him on our impact score because I think he's somebody that's performed well and consistent in this package in the playoffs that we've seen, and this is a pretty solid track for him. He's obviously last year's winner. We've said that a lot throughout the year, but I think this is where he shows that he can get the job done. He shows he's a veteran, points his races his way into these playoffs, and then see if we can find him maybe shuffling things up later on down the road.
I think he came into the playoffs as the 16th seed, and I think he's the 5th or 6th place right now. I mean, he's had a solid first round, likely to have a little bit tougher round next in round of 12 if he does, in fact, advance. I don't know. Another guy that I also didn't have advancing, but it looks like he may, Christopher Bell, 8,800. He's starting 6th. I'm at a 7.5. I think that's solid. I think you find ways to get him in, but there's not a lot of PD upside. I think there's fastest lap upside. We saw him have, what do you have, like 50, 60 or something like that? Fastest laps or more at Richmond. I think he could do that again and not even necessarily lead that many laps, but I think you still need him to do that for it to be a good enough play to outperform maybe a Harvick or some of the other guys we've already talked about. I like Seabell. Are you going to be using him much?
Yeah, I'll have him for sure. I've given him an 8. I think he offers a way to be different, and is somebody I will definitely shift to within this price range, because Brad Keselowski, 8,600, starting 10th. I'm at an 8 on him as well. I think he offers some upside with that place differential and that path to value, but I don't know how much exposure I want to him in this price range, being that we've seen brake issues with Penske, and there's a lot of braking at this track.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But Brad has a race win here in the last 6. He's had solid runs here in the past. I'm going to be at an 8 as well. I want to find ways to get him in. I think there's some PD upside, but you're right. The brake issue is concerning because they will be glowing red very early in this race, and you'll see that throughout the night. So I'm right there with you on the hesitancy with Brad, but I think it's worth playing if you're going to be mass entering, try to get a little different. And a guy that will probably be a little higher owned than he probably should, but a guy that I still want to have at least some exposure to is Maddie D. He comes in at 8,400. He's starting 19th. I'm at an 8.5. We all kind of know what happened a few years ago where he was on his way to his first victory. I already kind of mentioned it. I mean, this has been a pretty decent track for him, but he's also struggled here too. It's not always been just a cakewalk for him. I'm choosing to play him some this week because there's the PD upside. He doesn't have to have a lights-out race to hit value. But this is, in my opinion, probably the last realistic race that they could go in saying, yes, we can win it. They could do the same thing at Talladega. They've in that position earlier in the year, but it's Talladega. You can be perfect and get taken out by someone else. This is, I think, the last time. I think this is the race that the team's kind of thrown up the Hail Mary, and it might pay off, but it also might not. So that's kind of where I'm at on Maddie D.
Yeah, I can land it on an 8. I'm a little bit less high on him than you are. I see the upside. I've also seen how he's performed in some of these events the last couple of weeks, and I'm a little bit hesitant, but I still see he's got an opportunity here to really make a statement and get a job, and I think he's motivated enough to potentially have a strong performance, and that team's has dialed it in and given him fast cars, so we'll see, because this could be one of his better tracks to have a shot at it. I think somebody that's going to be interesting to watch and is a wild card this week, once again, Alex Bowman, starting 11th. He always seems to find a way to want to maybe sprinkle in your lineup, being that he's starting 11th and being that he's on that cut line. I think that is an opportunity where people are going to want to play him. I've given him a 7 because I think I want to have some exposure, especially in GPP. He's not in a cash lineup for me this week.
Yeah, definitely don't feel comfortable playing him in cash. I'm going to be at a 7 as well. This is it. I mean, they made it to the round of 8 last year. They need to do something this year. They had 3 wins, and you're going to get bounced out of the first round. I mean, literally, Eric Almirola is ahead of you, and he only has 1 win, and dude, if you're that 48 team, you got to make this round, or it is a bad year despite the wins. Someone who... Man, could you just imagine if Ross Chastain had somehow made it into the playoffs with the run that he's had? Oh, my gosh. Ross Chastain, he starts 17th. He has to start behind the playoff drivers, but he is the first guy behind the playoff drivers for a reason. He's 7,800. I already talked about it's unpredictable, but man, I like Chastain this week. I'm going to give him an 8.5. Not a lock by any means, but you kind of said it earlier. Chip Ganassi, they are last year they're going for it. I am loving what I'm seeing out of Chip Ganassi racing this time of the year. Kurt Busch looks good. Chastain has also been performing phenomenal. I don't know. Are you going to be using any Chastain this week?
Yeah, he's a green flag in our race guide for a reason. Our driver spotlight focuses on him being a solid play. I've given him an 8. I think he's got all the upside in the world. He's been fast. He's got a lot of speed, and he's been more consistent than we've seen him be in previous years. I'm liking what I'm seeing, and I think that a lot of people will probably land on him ownership-wise. So somebody I'm really excited about playing this week, Tyler Reddick, 7,600, starting 13th. I've given him an impact score of 8.5 because he is somebody that has a lot of success here. He's won 2 Xfinity races, and then he came in and got a top 5 at this event as a rookie. I'm looking for him to make a statement because he's also one of those playoff drivers that needs to have a solid race. He's been able to points race successfully this year. I'm all over him. Where are you at on Tyler Reddick?
I'm going to land at a 7, which I think is still a good score. I think kind of for me, I don't necessarily see him being quite a dominator, and he's not quite a PED play. I mean, he could be, but he's kind of I think he's priced a little too high for some of the guys that you're going to want to get. And then for some of the value down below, I think he just kind of falls in a little bit of an awkward pricing situation. So it might be hard, in my opinion, to kind of get him in there.
Oh, man, he's my cash big game build all day long at 7,600. All he has to do is get a top 10, really, and couple fastest laps, literally 2, and he's a cash game scenario dream. That's where I'm landing him in that. I'm also looking at a playoff driver that is in a cautionary position. Our yellow flag, $7,300 is Eric Almirola this week, starting 12th. He's not got a lot of good performance here at this track. It's going to be fun to see how this shapes up because he needs to have a solid race to make the cut. What are you expecting from him? Because I am landing on a 5. I think it's a coin flip to see if we get a strong performance or not.
It's an absolute coin flip with Almirola. If you go back and you look at his Bristol results, he's essentially hitting a top 5 or close to a top 5, or he's finishing 25th in the 30s. I mean, it's really almost checkers or wreckers with him, and there's way more wreckers than checkers on his in his past. But being that it's a playoff driver, he might be a little bit smart. I don't know. Like I said, it's a coin flip, so I'm at a 5. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is next. He's starting 23rd at 7,200. This is the guy that I actually want to find in my lineups more than like a Almirola. He's had some really strong runs, inconsistent as well. But for the price, the PD upside, he finished second on the dirt race or in the dirt race earlier this year. I'm going to be a 7.5 on old Ricky.
I'm at an 8. I think he's a guy that you could find a way to get into some lineups fairly easily and offers a great path to value. I think Ryan Newman, 7,200, starting 24th, is in a similar position. I've given him a 7.5. I think Ricky offers a little bit more upside than Ryan does. But Ryan Newman's had some really strong performances here in the past and has top 10 upside. I don't want to miss the boat. I think he probably can get a 15th place finish relatively well with some of the chaos that could potentially ensue.
It's hard with Newman because it seems like when he should do well, he underperforms, and when we're not expecting him to do well, he overperforms. So I'm going to be at a 7 for basically everything that you just said. But if I'm looking at drivers around this range, I'm probably going to just go ahead and more than likely pass on Newman and skip on down to Daniel Suarez. He's 6,600. That's a decent little price break. He starts 21st, so there's still some PD upside. We did, again, not factoring too much with the dirt, but he did have a really strong run at the dirt earlier this year. He's had some good runs here in his career. I'm going to be at a 7.5. I think Suarez, if they can bring a car that will not have any issues early and them get down laps early, I think he's a guy that can compete for a top 15.
Has his average finishing position in these playoffs in this package, so I'm looking for him to do well as well. That's why I landed on a 7.5. I think Eric Jones is somebody to play or shift from Daniel Suarez is Eric Jones, 6,400 starting 22nd. 7 is where I landed on him. You are a little bit higher, but he does have a lot of decent race history here. This is a solid track for him at Bristol.
I'm probably overestimating on Jones just a little bit because he had all those great runs in much better equipment. But I'm going to be at a 7.5. Again, the pricing is probably going to work out. You're probably going to need a couple of these 6K guys to fit these higher price dominators in there. That's my opinion. So that's why I'm going to be at a 7.5 on Eric Jones.
Yes, I think $6,000 really is probably one of the lower cutoff points. There's a couple of ways you can approach it. You'll talk about that. I'm Ryan Preece. I like him all day. I'm at an 8. He's at 20 or starting 6 or starting 27th, $6,000.
Right.
I think he's got a lot of upside. He's been strong here recently in this package and at this track. He's got a lot of upside, only being priced at $6,000.
I'm at a 7.5. You're right. He's got a lot of PD upside. He's trying to show out too. I mean, they're not bringing that car back next year. I think there's some hints, or if maybe this is official and I haven't seen it, but I think I saw some hints this week that he might be looking at a truck ride. I don't know. Either way, we know that this is his last year in this car, so you got to think the team and him are going to want to put out a good show. So I like Ryan Preece this week a lot. I think Corey LaJoie is probably the best play down here because he's semi-safe. He's starting 31st. He's only 5,600. There's a couple other guys that you can go to try to pivot off of him, but if you're building cash, this is probably the bottom I would go for cash. I'm going to give Corey a 7.
I'm at a 7 as well. He's got a lot of upside being that he starts 31st. He's been a little bit stronger in recent weeks. I look for him to have a lot of upside potential, so that's why I'm at a 7. I'm not too strong on some of these other guys. Michael McDowell was just below him. It's really the odd man out in the playoffs, starting 16th. He pretty much has to win. I don't see that really happening, so I've given him a 4.
So here's the interesting thing about McDowell. You know, we didn't grade him out very good in our projections, and that's what I think will more than likely happen. He won't finish as high as he starts. I'm at a 4.5. But here's the thing with McDowell. He's probably not going to carry much ownership. People aren't expecting as much from him. But here's the thing. If he can just finish 15th, no fastest laps, no laps led, I believe that's already over a 5X given his price tag. And he's capable of finishing 15th at Bristol. I don't like the play. I think it's risky, but it's one of those things. If you want to go in this price range and you think McDowell might have a little bit better run than what we're projecting him for, he can hit value pretty easily.
There's not a lot down below to really get excited about. I think if I'm looking at it, Anthony Alfredo, 5,200, starting 30th. I've given him a 5. I might have some exposure to him in GPPs to be able to fit a couple of those dominators at the top end. So that would be the only route I would have any exposure to him.
Yep, he's the bottom guy for me. I'm a 5.5 on Alfredo. Not much to say about any of the other guys. It's just if you want to build the higher priced guys and fit more of them in there, you can kind of plug and play some of these other guys down below. We have the full list of impact scores in our race guide. So if you want to have our thoughts on these back marker guys, it's not very good, but you can kind of see there might be a few that you identify a little bit more. But I think that should do it for the driver rundown. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, not really, but I want us to thank you for watching, and if you could hit that subscribe button, it really helps us out. If you liked what you saw, definitely drop a comment because we love seeing the comments. We've got all the content available on our Patreon that we've talked throughout the episode. If you want to take advantage of some early offers, we've got those available, so get in on the action there. Man, this is a lot of fun. I don't know if we see how things kind of play out with this elimination race one way or another, but I'm excited to see how it does ultimately shape up. But for the DK Garage, I'm Joe, that's Jeremy, and we'll see you next time.